Under tremendous pressure from people who thought that was outrageous, the Obama administration backtracked and released the unomitted transcript that made it clear that this was a follower of ISIS, or the Islamic State, who was pledging allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the Islamic State, and was doing this in accord with the Islamic State's call for murders of American civilians during Ramadan. Now, the next thing that was strange that happened was that right after this transcript was released, Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, said, "We may never know this man's motive." After, remember, she had done everything she could to cover it up by omitting all the salient portions of the transcript, and then, only under pressure, had released it. She then proceeded to ignore what it said. Now, it gets worse. There was recently a 30-year veteran of work with the FBI, Joint Terrorism Task Force, various other organizations and agencies, and he said that the FBI never dreamed, never guessed, it was never on their radar that jihadis would try to hit a gay nightclub. And so they were caught completely flat-footed by this. They had no idea this was going to happen. And this brings us to the heart of the problem that we face today. Right after this happened, Donald Trump made a speech, a major speech, about the Orlando massacre and foreign policy, in which he criticized Obama and Hillary Clinton for refusing to name the enemy and refusing to use the words radical Islam in conjunction with the threat that we face from the Islamic State and other groups like it. In response, Barack Obama, you may have seen this, was angrier than I've ever seen him be. You could tell he was just seething and raging, not about the attack, not about the 49 people killed, but about that Donald Trump criticized him for saying that he should be calling the threat radical Islam. And he said, what would this change if we used this term? And he said, would it win us allies? Would it give us some great new strategy? It would not do a thing. He said, we know who we're fighting, and we know what we're up against, and we don't need to use these terms because they will just validate the enemy, who are claiming to act in the name of a great religion. Now, the question that I want to bring to you today is, who is right? Is Donald Trump right, or is Obama right, when Donald Trump says we have to call this a threat from Islam itself, and Barack Obama says, above all, we must not call this a threat from Islam itself? Does it really make any difference? Does it really matter? And if so, how? Now look, in the first place, remember that the FBI guy said that they had no idea that a jihadi might try to hit a gay nightclub. Now, if you look into the teachings of the religion of Islam, you find one thing, that Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, said that anybody who commits homosexual acts should be put to death. No ifs, ands, or buts, no argument. What Muhammad says in Islam goes. Muhammad in the Quran, the holy book of Islam, is called the excellent example. And that means everything he does is right and ought to be imitated by Muslims. So if Muhammad said, put gays to death, that means put gays to death. All the sects of Islam teach that. All the schools of Islamic law teach that. That is not negotiable. It's considered to be the law of Allah, the law of the supreme God. The Islamic State, or ISIS, or ISIL as the president calls them, is an organization that occupies territory larger than the size of Great Britain in Iraq and Syria, and also has territory of allied groups in Libya, in Nigeria, and elsewhere. It's an international terrorist organization, and it claims to be the caliphate, which in Islamic teaching is the only government to which Muslims should owe allegiance. They should not owe allegiance, according to Islamic teaching, to American government, French government, German government, Mexican government, whatever. They only owe allegiance to the caliphate. The only hitch to that is that there hasn't been a caliphate since 1924. But the Islamic State, or ISIS, has gained a lot of traction all around the world by claiming to be the new caliphate. And a lot of Muslims have believed it. So many Muslims have believed that, as a matter of fact, that 30,000 Muslims from 100 countries around the world have gone to Iraq and Syria to join ISIS, and also they're able to get young Muslims in the United States like Omar Mateen to do what they say because they're the caliphate. And what did they say? They said hit American civilians during Ramadan. Ramadan is the Muslim holy month when they fast all day. And because in Islamic teaching, in the Quran, the holy book of Islam, I happen to bring mine today, so if you have yours, you can turn with me to chapter 9, verse 5, and you can see that it says, kill the unbelievers wherever you find them. That is not equivocal or ambiguous, and it's also repeated in two other places in the Quran. Chapter 9, verse 29 says, fight against those who do not believe in Allah in the last day, even if they are of the people of the book, which is the Quran's term for Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya, which is a tax, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So this is a divine command, a command from God, as they see it, to wage war against and to kill people who are not Muslim. And so it's considered to be a holy act because God commands it. And so if it's a holy act, and Ramadan is the time when you're supposed to fast and pray and get closer to Allah, then to kill unbelievers is a holy act during Ramadan that will help you get closer to Allah. You see how it works? And so there have been over 1,000 people killed since this Ramadan began. Ramadan's a month, it's 30 days long. We're now 21 days into it. 1,000 people around the world have been murdered by Islamic jihadis. This Ramadan so far, there's 9 more days to go. The death toll will rise higher than that. So Omar Mateen, he sees this gay club, and he sees that Muhammad said put gays to death, and he sees that ISIS has commanded killings during Ramadan. It all fits together. It's very clear what he was going to do. But you see, it's only clear if you know something about Islam and Islamic teaching. If you know about Ramadan, if you know about jihad, if you know about the Quran saying wage war against and kill unbelievers, and so on. Otherwise, it's completely unclear. Now, I'll tell you something. During this introduction, this fine gentleman said he told you that I have trained FBI and US military groups and so on. What I used to do, I did it for about 5 years, and I would go in and teach them about what the Quran said and what Muhammad said so that they would know what the people who are trying to kill us are trying to do. It's an adage as old as warfare. If you've ever studied The Art of War, which is a book by an ancient Chinese sage, Sun Tzu, he says, first thing, know your enemy. If you do not know your enemy, you can't beat it, because you won't know what he's trying to do, how he is going to go about trying to get to that goal, and so you won't be able to formulate effective means to counter him. And that's the situation that we're in. Remember that FBI man once more, that he said, we had no idea they were going to hit a gay club. Well, if they had studied Islam, if they had known about the first few basic principles of the Islamic religion, they would have had every reason to think that a gay club would be hit, and during Ramadan. Now, why don't they know that? Because, of course, Obama is committed to the idea, as he said in response to Trump, that it's absolutely worthless and wrong and even offensive to say that the people we're up against are Muslims and it has anything to do with the Islamic religion. I used to train FBI and military up until 2011. In October 2011, 57 Muslim organizations wrote to John Brennan, who is the head of the CIA now, and at that time he was the head of he was the Homeland Security czar. He was Obama's principal advisor for Homeland Security. And they wrote to Brennan and they said, you got to get rid of Spencer, and you've got to get rid of these other people, and you've got to take out every mention of Islam and jihad in connection with terrorism. And Brennan wrote back on White House stationery. Now you understand, this is the government. They have paper. Brennan has his own stationery. He didn't have to go into the Oval Office and say, Mr. President, can I borrow a sheet of paper? He used White House stationery to show this is the highest level of authority, that this is official US government policy. And he wrote back to those Muslim organizations, and he said, absolutely, you're right. We're going to fire these trainers, including me, and we're going to erase every mention of Islam and jihad from counter-terror training, because it's wrong and offensive to Muslims to suggest that Islam has anything to do with terrorism. And so every mention of Islam and jihad was scrubbed from counter-terror training, and it's been 5 years since that happened now. So if you think about it, think about this. This is how that works. If you were to go to the FBI out of high school, and you say, I want to join the FBI, or out of college, I want to join the FBI, and you join the FBI, and they say, we're going to put you in counterterrorism. You're going to be catching terrorists, and so we're going to train you as to what the terrorists are all about. They will train you about right-wing militiamen, and white supremacists, and KKK, and neo-Nazis. And there will be one group, rather conspicuously, that they will not say a word about, and that's Islamic jihadis. If you go into the FBI today and you get trained as a new agent in fighting terrorism, you will not be taught a word about what the largest terror threat in the world is all about. And that's official Obama administration policy. So what happens is bad ideas get people killed. And this is the situation that we're in. It may well be that that attack in Orlando could have been stopped if we had been on the ball on this issue. In Orlando, Omar Mateen, the killer, a few years back, he had a job actually in a security firm. And in the security firm, he would talk to his coworkers, and he would say, I love jihad, I love Osama bin Laden, I think it's the United States is this terrible criminal entity that has to be destroyed. They reported him to the FBI. The FBI did nothing. Why did the FBI do nothing? There's two possible reasons, and probably both were in play. One is, they didn't know how to deal with that kind of information because they have not been trained. They did not know what it meant if he said he loved jihad.